Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Activate Her with me, Sally Goodwin. And on this cold, wet, windy, stormy Cape Town morning, I'm not sure what it's like wherever you are, but here in Cape Town, it is very, very cold and very, very miserable and very, very stormy. So I trust that some of you have the pleasure of being able to watch me tucked up in bed, or otherwise some of you may, good morning, terrific Tamsin, or some of you might be on your way to work in this weather, and if so, then I trust that the traffic is not too bad and that it's all good morning, amazing Anthea, that everything is good and that you are managing to get wherever you need to go. And I'm also going to trust that you will be able to hear me speaking this morning, because you know our house has this like tin, whatever it's called, roof. Good morning, amazing Anthea from J Bay. Welcome, elegant Estrelita. Beautiful to see you, my darling. Good morning, famous Chantel. Welcome, my lovely radiant Roz. Welcome, my darling. So this weekend I was ministering in Hermanus. Oh, hello, incredible Anisha. Good to see you. I was ministering in Hermanus this weekend. Oh, Adele, welcome, my love. It's so good to have you on the live. Joyful Jolene, good morning, my sweet pea. I was ministering in Hermanus this weekend. Absolutely amazing weekend. And so for those of my Hermanus ladies that were there, and then my ladies who came from Cape Town to be in Hermanus with me, thank you so much. That was just incredible. Love you too, beautiful Bertha. And one of the Hermanus ladies, you might know, her name is Cynthia Boysant, and she is also a prophet. She walks in the office of a prophet, very powerful prophetic voice, and she makes these earrings. I've showed you earrings that she's made before, and Elmi Daneka is the Hermanus lady who organizes these ministry events in Hermanus once a month. So I go to Hermanus once a month and do these ministry events, and Elmi Daneka is the one who organizes it. And then Cynthia, good morning, beautiful Brigitte, bonjour. And Cynthia makes these earrings, and she makes pairs of earrings, and then she gives them or puts them on specific seats, all different earrings, not all the same. This time it was all different earrings. And good morning, Mama Tessa, my lovely. So good to see you. So these are the ones that she gave me this weekend. Absolutely beautiful. Aren't they gorgeous? I just love the color, the lilac, and it goes, you see, with my jersey. That's why I'm wearing this jersey. So I choose my clothes according to my earrings, not the other way around, which is just, you know. So anyway, and I think I've got them on the different way, but in the packet, if you put the two earrings together, they make a flower. So, but I think I've swapped them around, but in the packet, if you put the two earrings together, they make a flower. Just beautiful. So yes, so Hermanus was amazing. It was just a stunning event. God was there, his weighty presence. Good morning, tremendous Tishka was there, which was just incredible. You know, as always, he always shows up, and he shows up differently every single time. So, you know, it's just, he's always there, but he shows up differently, and it was intimate, and it was lovely, and really just a time to spend together in the Lord. Good morning, special Sonia. Welcome, my darling. And then also this weekend coming, significant Sylvia, lovely to see you. This weekend coming is the women's weekend away, our getaway, our women's getaway. I don't like to call it a camp because camp, I don't know, just sounds like a school camp. And we've decided that we don't like to call it a retreat because we are not retreating, we are advancing. So a women's getaway camp. Good morning, joyful Joe Allison. And we are going to be in Wellington this weekend. So all of us from this Activate Her community, from this Church Without Walls family, and it was so amazing because at the event in Hermanus on Saturday, I was saying something about church, and my gorgeous spiritual daughter Sonia. Good morning, Stu. Welcome. Women's getaway. There we go. My gorgeous spiritual daughter Sonia. She pops up and she says, "I go to the Church Without Walls." So I was like, "Absolutely, you so do." Or, my church is the Church Without Walls, or something like that. So it's just so amazing to see people embracing the concept of this community, this family, this Church Without Walls, that this church that is this body of believers, should I call it, this community of believers that is determined to go beyond the four walls of church buildings out into the world, to take the gospel and the goodness of God out into the wider world, and to people who would never set foot in a church building or cross the threshold of a specific ministry space. So welcome everybody to this week's episode of Start Your Week with Sally. It is Monday, and it is a stormy Monday in Cape Town, as I said. But it is a good day. It is a good day to be alive. It is a good day to be in the presence of the Lord. It is a good day to be filled with the goodness of God. And so this morning I woke up. This morning, and as I was just lying there spending time with the Lord, I had a vision. Good morning to Relia, my darling. I had a vision, and in this vision there were a whole lot of women, traveling on a bus. So I was on a bus with a whole lot of women. We were traveling on a bus, and we were traveling, and it felt like we were going a long way. It was a long bus drive, and we were traveling along in this bus, and then we came to this beautiful, green pastures. There was a river and these green pastures and these beautiful trees and just this absolutely beautiful scenery. And the bus driver said to us, "Would we like to get out?" Good morning, courageous Conrad. The bus driver said to us, "Would we like to get out the bus and just sit and rest for a little while next to the river on this green grass, and take in the beautiful scenery?" And so we said, yes, we absolutely would. We would love to do that. And so we did that. So we all got out the bus and we went over to this, these green fields. And as we sort of got to where the river and the fields and the beautiful, almost like a picnic space was, where you could sit and just admire the scenery, there was another group of women sitting on the banks of the river, sort of admiring the scenery. And as you know how it is when you have a vision or a dream, there's some things that aren't said to you specifically, but you just know that you just know something. And so looking at these women who were already sitting on the banks of the river admiring the scenery, I knew that they had been there. Good morning, amazing Alida. I knew that oh, my gorgeous Natasha friend, welcome, my darling. I knew that these women had been sitting there for a while already. So in this vision, I knew, nurturing Nolene, welcome. I knew that these women had been sitting on the banks of the river admiring the scenery for a long time already. And they were very comfortable. They had blankets, and they had food and drink, and they had, you know, they were very, very comfortable in this beautiful space, and they were just sitting there in this beautiful space admiring the scenery. And we had just got off the bus, so we weren't as comfortable. We kind of went and we sat next to them, but a little bit away from them. There was just a little bit of a kind of a distance between, you know, because if you're going to be polite, you don't go and sit on top of people. So we sat just a little bit away from them, and we sat there and we were just loving the creation, what God had made, how beautiful everything was. And we started to chat to the ladies who had been there for ages. And so the ladies who had been there for ages started to chat to us, and they were just going on about how beautiful it was there, and how there was, you know, there was food, and there was provision, and there was beauty, and there was all, you know, all of these sorts of things there in that space. And it reminded me of, you know, the Lord is my shepherd, you know, and the rivers and the green pastures that are spoken about in Psalm 23. And then it was, you know, so in conversation, we got to hear that they had been there for a very long time, but they were very comfortable there, and they had chosen not to go ahead with their journey because this seemed like a perfect space for them. And so just as we were all just really breathing everything in and just loving it, the bus driver came back, and he said, come on now, it's time to leave. We need to continue. And most of the women who had been on the bus, you know, got up and immediately started to walk back to the bus to get back on the bus. But some of the women, they stayed. They were sort of unsure, because the women who were camping, you know, in that beautiful scenery, those women said, you can stay with us, you don't have to go. You can stay here where it's comfortable. You can stay here where there's provision. You can stay here where there is, you know, space for you, and where there is beauty, and there is awe, and there is wonder. You can stay here. You don't have to leave. We have enough for you. And so you are welcome to stay here with us. And as I walked back to get on the bus, I looked back and I realized that there were still a couple of women who had not come. They were sort of hovering. And then the bus driver called out again, and he said, it is time to go. It is time. And one or two more women came, and eventually everyone who was on the bus seated, ready to go on the rest of the journey. And if you looked out the front of the buses, of the front window of the bus, you could see that the journey ahead didn't look like this green river. It looked difficult, and there was a dusty road, and the road looked narrow, and you were going up this mountain, and it didn't look nearly as pleasant as this sort of Psalm 23 space almost. And then the bus driver turned, he was walking back to the bus, and he turned around one more time, and he looked back at the women who hadn't yet come over, and he said, are you coming? He said, are you coming? Just once. And then he turned around and he got back in the bus, and he got himself all sorted out, seatbelt on and everything, and he pushed the button to close the door. And I said to him, aren't you going to call them again? Like, don't you think, shouldn't we call them again? You know, shouldn't we just, you know, maybe they didn't hear you, maybe they have decided they want to come, maybe we should just call them one more time. And the bus driver said, the trumpet has sounded 3 times. Now we leave. And the bus left. And it was just like, you know how in that kind of moment of when you're half asleep, half awake, and this vision happens, and I'm just, you know, and we've been speaking about the winds of change, and we've been speaking about, we've been speaking about the winds of change, we've been speaking about the headwinds, we've been speaking about the tornadoes, we've been speaking about the resistance, we've been speaking about all that sort of thing over the last few teachings. Good morning, my gorgeous Anna Marie. We've been speaking about all those kinds of things. Just a side note, please, ladies and gentlemen, a side note. I have been ministering in Hermanus the whole weekend, and it's been a bit crazy. I have like 28 unanswered WhatsApp messages. The reason I'm saying that is because Anna Marie sent me a voice message that I haven't listened to yet. So I have about 28 unlistened to or unread WhatsApp messages. Please don't be offended. I will respond. I just need a chance to go through them all. Welcome. So that's just a side note for everybody. Oh, and one last side note. We have one sponsorship available for the Wellington camp this coming weekend. We have one sponsorship available, one sponsorship left available. First come, first served. First person to message me and say they want to come to Wellington is the person who gets the sponsorship. Okay, so we're moving on. So here we go, and the bus left. And so I was kind of lying there and just, about to get up and, get ready to come in and meet with all of you online and have a beautiful, brilliant Church Without Walls space. And I was sort of trying to process it with the Lord. And to be honest with you, I was saying to the Lord, can I release this morning? Because, sometimes the things God shows you, you can't release immediately. You have to first process them with the Lord. But I felt an ability, delightful, Danette, welcome. I felt an ability, or I felt him give his permission for me to release the vision. But even as I was getting ready and cleaning my teeth and all the rest of it, he was processing the vision with me, even as all of that was happening. And so, it was just this amazing space of just being with him and kind of, processing this vision and trying to determine what exactly, in light of everything that we have been talking about, everything that we have been saying, everything, the winds of change and all of that kind of thing, the chaos in the world, again, there is just this call from God. There is this call from God to separate ourselves out and take this journey with him. And there is this warning, almost, a warning from the Lord, that we are going to all be, along this road, there are going to be spaces and places that are going to be comfortable. There are going to be spaces and places that are going to be beautiful. There are going to be spaces and places where there will be plenty of provision, plenty of seemingly like-minded people, plenty of beauty, and places that we really feel like God is there. And we are correct. God was there, but God is moving on. And when we start traveling along this journey, we tend to travel, especially, when we go and we get ourselves sorted out in all manner of things, and we kind of, doing all of these things. Good morning, beautiful Brenda. We tend to travel light. We really do. We tend to travel light. And we kind of, we get started, but then we find a space where we're comfortable, and then we start adding things, a blanket and maybe a pillow so we can lie there, and maybe some binoculars so we can see further, and maybe a costume so we can swim in the river, and then we put up a tent because actually we need some covering, and then we kind of then we've got our food, and then we have a little space to cook, and then and gradually we become comfortable in a space that God only ever meant as a rest stop. It was just supposed to be a rest stop. It wasn't supposed to be a place where we camped forever. Or it was a place where God demonstrated his love, his grace, his mercy, his awe-inspiring creation, his supernatural works. It was a place where God demonstrated all of that for us so that we would have courage and boldness and be ready and be willing to take the journey ahead. But instead of that, some of us have gotten so comfortable in the rest stop that we don't want to carry on with the journey. Some of us feel that because where we have rested is so comfortable and so beautiful and so wonderful, it must be God. But we can hear the trumpets blowing in the distance. We can hear the voice of God saying, it's time. We can hear the prophet saying, it's time. It's time. The remnant needs to arise. The people need to rise up. We need to be separated out. The wheat is being separated from the chaff. God is doing a new thing. God is doing a new work. We hear all those messages and we sit in the beauty and the comfort of where we are. And we say, no, this doesn't apply to us. This doesn't apply to us. I have everything I need right here. I have everything I need right here. Surely God does not expect me to get back on the bus and take a trip along a road where I don't know where I'm going. And we forget that we didn't know where we were going when we reached that rest stop. We didn't know where we were going when we reached that rest stop. But now, because we have experienced such comfort and such beauty and such, and all these amazing things, because we have experienced that, we have forgotten what it is like to get back on the bus and go in a direction that we do not know, to a place that we do not know, following a promise, the promise from the Lord that He will take us and He will keep us. So this whole vision, and it has been expounding and expanding ever since this morning, ever since I woke up. But I want us to turn to, because when I was thinking about, what are you saying, Lord, in terms of scripture and in terms of biblical background, a biblical space, a biblical, what am I trying to say? I can't even think now what I'm trying to say. Anyway, the Lord took me to 1 Samuel chapter 15. And this is where Samuel has told Saul that the Lord has sent him to anoint him king over Israel, and he has to listen to the Lord. And God, the fullness of the evil of the Amalekites has been reached. So I know that some of these Old Testament stories where God says, destroy the women, the children, the animals, the everything, they're very difficult to read. They're very difficult to read. They're very difficult to take on board. And we think, oh my word, Lord, how can you be like that? And that is why we often think that the Old Testament God and the New Testament God are two different gods, but they are not, because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. What we miss is the verse in Scripture where it says that God allows a nation, every nation has an opportunity to follow the Lord, back then and today. And God allows a nation to reach a period of where the fullness of the evil is complete. And that's what He did with the Amalekites. With the fullness of the evil was complete. He had given them an opportunity to follow Him. He had given them grace. He had given them mercy, like He does to everybody. But the fullness of the evil was complete, and D-Day had come. The time had come to deal with them once and for all. So He gives Saul this instruction to wipe the Amalekites out completely. But Saul thinks he knows better, because Saul sees the riches of the Amalekites. Saul sees the cattle and all of the stuff that the Amalekites have. And he thinks, well, why wouldn't God want us, His people, His Israelites, why wouldn't God want us to have all those riches to add to what we already have, so we can have what the Amalekites have? And he is disobedient. He is disobedient. He disobeys a direct instruction from the Lord in terms of the belongings of the Amalekites. Not only that, but he disobeys the instruction to wipe them all out, and he actually saves the king. What was his name again? He saves him. Or is it this one? Sorry. Agag. He keeps Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and which he's, because obviously it's that is ego, right? So it was very important in those days. If you were a king and you conquered another nation, you took their king captive, and then what they would do is they would have these processions, and all the nations then would have these processions where the king would be forced to, the previous king would be forced to walk, in chains, or he would be dragged behind horses, or he would just be humiliated. They would castrate them, just basically torture them, humiliate them completely in front of the people, so that the defeat was complete. But God had always called Israel to be different. God always called Israel to be different. God didn't want Israel to have a king. He only gave them a king because they asked for it. And so now they have their very first king, Saul, and already he is messing up completely. Anyway, so we know the story, but this is where I want, and we know this verse, right? We know this verse. Obedience is better than sacrifice. We all know that. We've quoted it a million times, etc., etc. So 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 22, Samuel said, "Has the Lord as great a delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams." Why? Because the Israelites tried to make what they had done better, and they sacrificed some of what they had taken from the Amalekites to the Lord in an attempt to manipulate God, in an attempt to manipulate God into saying, "Oh, it's okay then. It's okay that you disobeyed me, because as long as you've sacrificed." And we do that without even realizing. We try and manipulate God. We try and manipulate God. I will never forget years and years and years ago, hearing Bill Johnson tell a story of how when his boys were very young, one of them got really, really sick, like really, really sick, at death's door sick kind of thing. And Bill Johnson went into his study or something, and he said to the Lord, "I'm going to praise you. I'm just going to praise you until you heal my son." And the Lord said to him, "Stop manipulating me." And he said he stood for a moment, and he just thought, what? And then he realized that the posture of his heart wasn't, "I'm going to praise you until you heal my son, Lord, because I know that this is your will is going to be done, your kingdom is going to come. The posture of his heart was, "If I go and praise God in the midst of this, he will heal my son." He was trying to manipulate God into healing his son, and he was completely open about it. And so this is what the Israelites are trying to do. They're trying to manipulate God into forgiving what they'd done wrong by sacrificing to him from the spoils that they had taken from the Amalekites. And so we all know that then it says, "But obedience is better than sacrifice." God would rather you obeyed than you sacrificed, because can I tell you something? Obedience is the sacrifice. Obedience is a sacrifice. So that is why obedience is better than sacrifice. Because when you obey God, even when you don't understand, even when you're not sure, even when you can't see the way ahead, that is your sacrifice. That is how you sacrifice. But what we often don't pay too much attention to is verse 23. "For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as idolatry and teraphim. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he also has rejected you from being king." Now, that's the Amplified translation. In the Amplified Classic, it says this: For rebellion is as serious as the sin of divination, fortune-telling. Rebellion is as serious as the sin of divination or fortune-telling. And listen to this: disobedience is as serious as false religion and idolatry. Disobedience is as serious as false religion and idolatry. Can we just take a moment? Can we just take a moment? Why? Why does God say that? Why does God say that disobedience is as serious as false religion and idolatry? Because if you disobey God, you are not treating him like God. If you disobey God, you are putting something else before God. What could that be? What kind of idol, what kind of false religion could that possibly be? Money, family, comfort, provision, fear. We make an idol out of our fear without even realizing it. When we choose to disobey God because we are too scared of what the road ahead looks like. Now this is in Samuel's days, and we have Jesus and the Holy Spirit and the New Covenant and all of those wonderful things. But there are premises that were put forward in the Old Testament that theologians and scholars say you cannot deny a premise that has been established in the Old Testament unless Jesus specifically says that that doesn't apply anymore. And Jesus was very much about, take up your cross and follow me. Nowhere in the New Testament did Jesus say, you know what, it's okay to disobey. There is lots of grace, lots of mercy, lots of love. It's all going to be fine in the end. It will all work out okay in the end. He didn't say that. Yes, there is grace. Yes, there is mercy. Yes, there is love. But eventually, that grace reaches a point where God is like, I have now asked you this 3 times. And I'm not saying it will only be 3 times. It might be 33 times for you. It depends. Where God says, I have now asked you this 3 times. I have sounded the trumpet 3 times. And you would rather camp around what I was doing. You would rather remain in the space that I was moving. You would rather stay in the space of comfort where my presence had been than get into the bus and travel a road you do not know to the fullness of the glory that is available to you. Remember the bones of the man that were the dead soldier that was thrown into the pit with the bones of, was it Elijah or Elisha? I can't remember. And the anointing on their body was so much that the soldier came to life. The presence of God, there was a semblance of the presence of God left there. There was an aroma of the presence of God still there. There was definitely, but the fullness of the weightiness of the glory of God was not in that pit with those bones. He had moved on. And so there are many of us, and this word has just been, it has been just, I don't know, like really resonating in my spirit. There we go. I knew there was something wrong. It has been resonating in my spirit. It has been, with all of the visions that I've had about the winds of change, with the vision that the visions that I've had about remember I told you the dream I had years ago about, who's prepared to choose the new thing and who wants to stay. And then this morning that vision was so clear. That vision was so clear. And my heart was so broken and filled with compassion for the people who chose to stay. Because I knew that the beauty of that place was going to wear thin eventually. You know what it's like. Sometimes you go to a place and it's so beautiful. And I can remember a friend of mine, and this is going back years and years before I even had children, a friend of mine moved to Cape Town from Joburg. And she said to me every single day, she drove to work and she looked at the mountain and she was just like, oh my word. And she said to me, Sally, do you not look at the mountain every day and just go, oh my goodness, that's beautiful? And I said, to be honest, I don't really notice the mountain. It's always been there. I've lived in Cape Town most of my life. The mountain has been there ever since I've known. Yes, every now and again you look and you think, wow, we're so blessed and it's so beautiful, but you don't every single day look at the mountain and go, oh wow, that's just amazing. And so that is the thing. When you stay in a place for too long, you don't see the beauty anymore. You start to see the cracks in the foundation. When you start to see the weeds in the grass. You start to see the thorns and the thistles. You start to see that, in summer the river dries up a little bit. And in winter it's so full that you have to move further up the field because there's too much water. You start to feel like a tent isn't wonderful in the wind and the rain that will come. That the beauty and the comfort of that space wears thin eventually. But by then, the bus has already left. And God's grace will always give you an opportunity to catch up. And maybe another bus will come along. But for me, and I have said this many, many times, I want to be at the forefront of what God is doing. That's not ego speaking or arrogance or anything. I don't want to be the person, because there isn't going to be the person at the forefront of this move of God. It's going to be about his people. It's going to be about the people who thoroughly enjoyed the rest stop, took in everything from there that he had for them, received the provision, received the rest, received the beauty, received everything and stored it all up inside of them so that they could get back on the bus and continue the journey into the unknown. That was the glory of the rest stop. It was always supposed to be a rest stop. Like when the Israelites camped in the wilderness, they didn't stay camped in the wilderness. If they'd stayed camped in the wilderness, if, for example, the place where God let the water pour out of the rock, they had said, well, we are just going to stay here forever because we have water coming out of that rock forever. We are just going to stay here. They would still be in the wilderness. They would never have made it to the promised land. If Paul or Peter had set up a church, wherever they were going, Ephesus, Philippi, Rome, and the church had grown and flourished and been amazing, and they had said, you know what, we're just going to stay here because this is where it's happening. Here are all the people. These people love us. They want to hear from us. The moment we move on to another space, these people fall apart because they forget what we taught them. So we're just going to stay. And instead of taking the gospel, around the world, we are going to build a mega church here in Rome. Or we are going to build a mega church here in Philippi. Or we are going to build a mega church here in Ephesus. Imagine if they'd done that. They would never have turned the world upside down. They would never have spread the gospel the way they were supposed to. They would have stayed at the rest stop in the comfort of people they knew, people who loved them, provision that was there, rest, the presence of the Lord, because the presence of the Lord was there. But this is a season, not even a season, it is an era for pioneers and trailblazers. It is an era for pioneers and trailblazers. Saul had the opportunity to be a pioneer and a trailblazer as the very first king of Israel. He had the opportunity to prove God wrong, to show God that he could actually be the best king ever and walk in complete obedience to the Lord and be a pioneer and a trailblazer for good kings in Israel going forward, that his legacy would be one of righteousness, would be one of obedience. And he failed almost at the very first hurdle. And then God still gave him grace, because God was preparing David. So what happens is sometimes we know we're walking in disobedience, but nothing really is going wrong. So we think to ourselves, okay, God must be okay with it. Can I just make a qualifying statement today, ladies and gentlemen? God is never okay with disobedience. God is never okay with disobedience. And my father used to say to me, my earthly father used to say to me, delayed obedience is the same as disobedience. When you do not obey immediately, that is disobedience. Delayed obedience is the same as disobedience. So Saul probably thought everything was going to be fine, because even though he had actually been disobedient, he was still king. Even though Samuel had told him that he would not remain king of Israel, he did remain king of Israel for years after that. Like 15 years from when David was anointed king until he actually reached a place where he could step into that kingship. So we sit comfortably in our disobedience, thinking God is okay with it, and then suddenly everything changes and we're left behind. Not left behind like in the rapture. When I say left behind, I always immediately think people are saying, oh my word, she's saying we're going to be left behind when there's a rapture. I don't believe in the rapture, so I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is this. There is grace. And God's mercies are new every morning, and his grace is eternal. But we mistake that for believing that it is permissible for us to be disobedient because it's all covered by grace. That is the hyper grace message. That it's okay to live in your sin, to live in your obedience for now, because it's all covered by grace. You just have to read the Bible. You just have to read the Bible to see that grace runs out at some point when you persist in your sin and persist in your disobedience, knowing full well what it is that God has called you to. There is a space, a transition space, where we all are kind of, I feel like God is calling me here, but I'm not 100% sure, and God allows that space for I need a bit of confirmation, Lord. I just need you to speak again because I feel like this is what you are saying, but I just need some wise counsel. There is grace for that. But we reach a point where we know, where if we had to be completely honest with ourselves, deep down inside, we know what God is calling us to do. We know what God is calling us to do, and we don't. We don't. We don't. So that is when disobedience becomes as the sin of divination, fortune telling. Why would rebellion? Because if you disobey God, when you know he's asking you to do this, when you have called, if you just remember when you were at school and you went on a school camp and you took a bus to, I don't know, when I was at school, which was a whole lifetime ago, we went to school in the wilds. And there was a bus to school in the wild. If they stopped so that all the little kiddies could go for a toilet break, and then they called you to get back on the bus, if you refused to get back on the bus, you were rebelling. You were rebelling against the authority of your teachers. You were rebelling against the authority of your prefects, or whatever the case may be. Rightly or wrongly, you are rebelling. That is rebellion. God says, Jesus says, if you are not for me, you are against me. There's no gray area. You're either for me or you're against me. He doesn't say you can be a little bit for me and you can be a little bit against me, and I get that. No. He says you are either for me or you're against me. And if you are against me, you're rebelling. You are in rebellion. And if you are in rebellion, it is as the same as divination or fortune telling. Why? Because you are relying on your own or somebody else's vision of the future. So you are saying to the Lord, I don't accept your vision of the future. I'm going to follow my vision or somebody else's vision of the future. So somebody else has told me that if I stay in this place, this will happen, or that will happen, or this will, and I'm choosing that. I'm choosing to believe in the words of someone else than your words, Lord. So I'm choosing somebody else's vision, which is like fortune telling. Which is like when you go to a fortune teller and you say to the fortune teller, what does my future hold? You are trusting in a fortune teller rather than in God. When you say to the Lord, I don't accept your way ahead. I don't want to get back on the bus again. You saying, you know what, I'm going to trust in the vision for the future that these women who have camped around this space have. I'm going to trust in their vision for the future. I'm allowing them to fortune tell. I'm allowing them to tell me what my future should look like. And sometimes we think that that's going to look terrible, and we're going to know that it's wrong, and we're going to know that it's bad. But sometimes it's wrapped up in very pretty clothing. Sometimes it's wrapped up in very pretty circumstances, and that's why for how many years have I taught and said to all of you, there are good things and there are God things, and not every good thing is a God thing. It might not be a bad thing, and it might be a God thing for somebody else, but is it a God thing for you? There is plenty of good when the enemy cannot tempt you into direct sin. When the enemy cannot tempt you to go and shoplift. When the enemy cannot tempt you to be unfaithful to your husband. When the enemy cannot tempt you to plunge a knife into somebody's chest. Direct sin. Then he starts with the other sins, the doubt, the fear, the doubt, the unbelief. When eventually you have managed to take authority over that stuff, then he starts to distract you. He uses distraction with good things. This ministry is a good ministry. This is where you should be involved. And God isn't saying it's not a good ministry. God isn't saying that the people involved there are not supposed to be there, but it's not for you. For you, it is not a God thing. It is just a good thing. And then we allow the voices of comfort and provision and yes, but I can do so much good in this space. I'm sure you can, and you probably would. But ultimately, it's not the space God wants you in. It's not the space you're supposed to be in. There is a God thing waiting for you. And whether you are doing it on purpose or not, you are rebelling against the will of God for your future. You are believing in a false religion, and you are setting up something else, another ministry or another person or another space. You are in idolatry basically, because you are putting that person, that space, that group of people, your family, your friends, your comfort, your provision, your finances, whatever it is, you're putting it between you and God, and that is idolatry. We often pat ourselves on the back because we don't worship. I can feel the anointing. I can feel the anointing. I'm getting so hot here because Holy Spirit is so fiery, and he so wants you to hear these words. So often we pat ourselves on the back because we don't worship sculptures or statues, and we don't have Buddhas in our home, and we don't have Hindu statues decorating our living rooms, and we are not people who worship gods of wood or stone. But we worship other things that are far more subtle and far easier to tell ourselves that it is not idolatry. But anything you put before God and yourself, between God and yourself, before the Lord's will for your life, is idolatry. You might think, well, I don't worship this. This doesn't have control over me. But you are choosing that thing over God. You are choosing your comfort over God. You are choosing your finances over God. You are choosing your family over God. You are choosing your children over God. Oh, how many times have God and I had to deal with that issue for me? You are choosing your friends over God. Been there as well. The people you thought loved you, been there too. And it is idolatry. Because you are believing the words of somebody else before you believe the words of the Father. The words of your Father. You would rather sit in comfort at the rest stop with the blankets and the cushions and the food and the drink, because you are concerned that you will not get that on the bus. But God has provided for you on the bus through the whole journey thus far, but the enemy whispers in your ear that maybe this provision, this amount of provision, this amount of comfort will not be available on the bus. But why would God leave you without when you are doing His will? Will there be difficult times? Absolutely. Is the road ahead narrow? Absolutely. Is it rocky? Is it gravelly? Are you going up a steep uphill? Yes, you are. Yes, you are. But God never leaves us or forsakes us. God will provide for you because you are stepping out in boldness and courage to follow the will of your Father. Now, I'm trying to think of how to say this. There is a space for wisdom to make sure that it is God you're hearing. There is a space for wisdom to make sure it is God you're hearing. If you woke up this morning and you heard a voice in your head say, move to Bulgaria, for example. I have nothing against Bulgaria. I'm just trying to think of a space that seems far away and different. Move to Bulgaria. I would not expect you to phone an estate agent, put your house on the market and start packing your things. I would expect you to approach people who you trust and who have wisdom. Now, there is a lesson there on its own, because sometimes the people closest to us, the people who love us, the people who want us to be safe, the people who want us to stay in a safe space and be comfortable and looked after, are not the people to ask whether they think God is moving us to Bulgaria. Because often those people will say no, because they don't want you to go off on some wild adventure. They want you to stay safe where you are. You need to find voices, prophetic voices that you trust, prophetic voices that carry wisdom, prophetic voices that can look at the word that you have received from the Lord objectively and say, yes, I think this is a word from the Lord, or no, I don't think that this is what God is saying. Bearing in mind that God is a practical God as well. There will be circumstances and things that He has to sort out, and He will sort those out, but He is also practical. He is also practical. So, that's not what I'm saying. You're not being, if you've just woken up with this word from the Lord, you're not being disobedient if you don't immediately get out of bed and start packing your case. But if, over the next 3 months, every morning you wake up and you hear God say, it's time to move to Bulgaria. And then you get people starting to send you things about Bulgaria. And then you get arbitrary strangers saying, you know what, I heard about this in Bulgaria, or I saw this in Bulgaria. And then you get, some sort of prophetic word from someone who's never met you about, I see you going into, Eastern Europe or something like that. Then God is saying, okay, are you hearing me? Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me? And then if 10 years have passed and you're still getting, you've maybe stopped getting the words, but you have like a whole file of prophetic words that said you're supposed to move to Bulgaria, then you're walking in rebellion. You're walking in disobedience. You're walking in divination, fortune telling, false religion, idolatry. So we each have a journey with the Lord. And we each have a space where we hear from the Lord, and we then weigh that up. We test and we weigh the word from God, from any prophetic people around us. We test the word, we weigh the word. We ask voices of wisdom what they think about the word. And then we say to the Lord, what does the timing of this word look like, Lord? What does the timing of this word look like? When I was, very quickly, because I'm going to finish off now. When I was about 45, I think I was 44, 45, God said to me, life begins at 49. And I was like, why 49? That's 5 years away or something, 4 years away. And he says, life begins at 49. And what he was telling me was that between 44, 45, and 49, I was going to travel this journey of learning and training and growing. And then the day before, the day after my 49th birthday, my husband and I were ordained. The day after my 49th birthday, my husband and I were ordained as ministers of the gospel. And then my journey into leadership and into ministry from that perspective began. I always knew I was called to leadership. God had told me years before that I was called to preach. I wasn't, trying to push myself into spaces and places to have a platform or find a pulpit or whatever, because he told me I would be in leadership. He told me I was going to preach, but he told me life begins at 49. So he was giving me the space. I didn't understand it at the time, not completely. I didn't understand it completely at the time. Why 49? But it's 49, 7 sevens. I'm a numbers girl, you know how it goes. But that was him. He gave me the word. He confirmed the word. And then he gave me the timing. And it all worked out that way because I just walked in obedience, even though I didn't know what the road ahead looked like. Even though I didn't know what the road ahead looked like, I just walked in that obedience. Obedience is better than sacrifice because obedience itself is a sacrifice. When you obey God and step out of the boat, out of your comfort zone, get back on the bus to continue the journey, you are sacrificing. You are sacrificing. And that is why obedience is better than sacrifice. Because by its very nature, obedience is sacrifice. But we want to sacrifice without obeying. We want to appease God. We want to appease him with our sacrifices without obeying. Ladies and gentlemen, don't be the ones left at the rest stop. Don't be the ones so in awe of the scenery and the comfort and the provision that you don't want to get on the bus and carry on the journey into the unknown. Because that, the unknown, is where the fullness of the weightiness of the glory of the Lord resides. And he is waiting for us. He is waiting for us. So, bless you this morning. Love you. And I shall see you all on Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. for Wisdom Wednesdays. And just a reminder, if you need to order books or diaries, order them this week, please. Mwah. Love you.